Welcome to Through the Eyes of Survivors. I'm your host, Tara Woodlee from Break the Silence Against Domestic Violence, and we're here to promote healthy relationships and how we can all come together to break the scourge of domestic violence and abuse in general. So please welcome our current guest, which I am very happy to have Mark on with us. It's Mark Entrekin. Through the Eyes of Survivors, Mark is a seasoned professional with over 30 years of experience as a speaker, trainer, motivator, management consultant, life coach, and entrepreneur with a bachelor degree in business information systems, a master's degree in organizational management, and numerous certifications. Mark is a powerhouse of knowledge and inspiration. Yes. So Mark's career is defined by his ability to create environments that foster unity, motivation, and success. His hands-on initiative approach to business and personal leadership has helped countless individuals and organizations achieve their goals. Since 1990, he has specialized in life and business coaching, offering guidance to families, individuals navigating challenges like divorce, relationship recovery, and parenting. So we welcome Mark's unique insights here into the podcast and look forward to having a healthy relationship discussion and how to foster resilience in our topic today. So thank you, Mark, for joining us on the podcast.
Tara, thank you so much. I am honored. It was an honor to have you on my podcast. It is a bigger honor to be on your podcast. And all that we are working together on, again, is that achieving unity. And it is the power of encouraging, inspiring, and including others personally and professionally. And I so just adore what you do. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And we appreciate what you do. And I had a really wonderful time on your podcast. So definitely check out Mark's podcast at the end here. We'll have links to that. It's a wonderful resource. So, Mark, as we get started, a lot of times, like anger is one of the strongest emotions that we all have, that people experience, especially when you have trauma related to anger. So can you kind of share your personal journey and what led you to creating what led you to do what you're doing now? So
Thank you, Tara. That's a good point. And I like the way you say that, because too many times, what is the definition of anger? Is
right.
anger when it gets into a physical fight? Is anger when somebody is truly physically hurting someone else? Or is anger also that frustration that we have sometimes? And on the joking side of this, it's not that I don't get angry, it's just that we manage that anger, because anger is nothing more than not achieving effective results. Actions, anger, A-N-G-E-R, actions not gaining effective results. That's all anger is. And for me, Microsoft, I use Windows constantly from, of course, right now we're on Zoom, and it causes me issues at times. So I'm not saying I don't get angry when technology doesn't work, but it's that ability to manage that anger. Because if we're not gaining effective results, what are we doing? Where's
Right.
the value in that process? So managing that anger from something as simple as pouring the milk and it spills on the counter, to driving to or from work or to the office or to the grocery store, and some blankety blank pulls in front of you. We get angry at first, but just to be able to say, okay, that person has a stronger need for whatever reason to be there before I am, let that person go, because that anger has no value. We need to take that anger into being calm. And what is calm? CALM. Canceling anger leads motivation. So go from that anger to calm, because canceling that anger leads motivation to take us above ourselves and into another ability to enjoy others, whether it be our spouse, our relationship, our children, but to eliminate any thoughts of anger or ideas of violence from our vocabulary.
Incredible. So, what started you in this direction with your organization and everything, like the personal aspect for you?
And my personal aspect goes way back to when I was in just completed the second grade, and I lived in southern Mississippi, a small town called Carrier. Picayune's about 7 miles away. It's much larger. People might know that one, Picayune, Mississippi. And it was during the time of all the racial tension across the United States and integration of schools, and the violence that was going on at that time was pretty traumatic for my parents. And my mother had a sister who lived out in southeastern New Mexico, a small town called Lovington. And to get away from that violence, we moved out to Lovington, New Mexico. And I was just starting the third grade. And of course, at that time, what am I, maybe, 8 years old? Get second grade, getting in that new school and moving from one environment to another environment. And it didn't hit me at the time, but it came in later that, wait, I moved from a somewhat black community to a somewhat Hispanic community or brown community. What's the difference? I'm fairly dark skinned for some people's standards. What's the difference? But I grew up, went on through my junior high, middle school years, went through high school, and then had a scholarship to the University of Alabama. And but came back down south, and my brother-in-law and I were coming home one evening, and from what they told me, the front left driver's side tire blew out. And when it did, it took us into the ditch. Well, when that truck hit the ditch, I didn't have my seat belts on back then. We didn't know that how much of a lifesaver that was. Well, I went through that windshield. I still got some huge scars on the left side of my head. I've got scars on my hand, scars on my back, scars on my chest. But I was flown by helicopter to Hattiesburg, to a hospital there, and I went through 9 pints of blood. I was in intensive care for several days in the hospital for about 17. And those 9 pints of blood that I received there, when we think about it, all my parents cared about was keep him alive. That was number one. They didn't think about, well, is that blood that he's getting another college student? Is that blood that he's getting, is that an educated person? Does that person smoke? Does that person have tattoos? Does that person have earrings all over their body? It doesn't matter. It's all about saving my life. It's all about having the same blood type. I'm an A positive, so I could accept O positive or O negative or A positive from anyone, red, yellow, black, brown, or white. Didn't matter about their education level. That's what kept me alive. So I went through that, and I went to college at Texas Tech, actually. Went back home to my parents' house in Lovington, and then grew on from that. And then later, I got through college, got married, then went into a divorce. And this is where a lot of domestic violence comes from, because that my divorce was fairly traumatic. And when I was going through my divorce, it happened about the same time that big deadbeat dad syndrome kicked off.
Mm-hmm.
One of the cases was the guy that won the lottery and was a divorced dad, but didn't give any financial assistance to his spouse, to his children. He just wasted the money, didn't care anything about family. But that culture was created. That learning was created around the world, totally internationally, around the world, that put us as male partners, the father, the dad, into a negative area because they were theoretically deadbeat. I had all kinds of problems just being able to see my children, and my ex got sole custody, like I wasn't really a part of it. And then at that time, I got what was called visitation. And I'll tell you more a story about that in a minute, but I'm I'm not a visitor, and nobody is in their own child's life. And that legal community, that wording, as we're going to talk about more as we go forward, of that concept of a visitor in the child's life and how our legal judicial system and our legislature puts that together is a negativity toward parents. So back
Right.
to my story.
Yeah.
In that process, when I would go into the courtroom, I was theoretically a minority. I was theoretically a labeled individual because I was that dad, that theoretical deadbeat dad. No, it didn't matter that I was spending a lot of money. I paid alimony, I paid the child support, paid her attorney's fees. I was just a financial entity, and she was the mother. That
Mhm.
aura of the time was very detrimental to one party. And that's where we have to come together. And as you say, take the silence out of the violence, whether it's a physical violence, emotional violence, or just a concept of violence. And I can talk more about that, even things such as our race. There's only one race in this world, and that's the human race. There's no such thing as red, yellow, black, brown, or white, except in our minds or our own concepts. You can't go get a DNA test and say, oh, the DNA says this person's red, yellow, black, brown, or white. No, there's not one. There's not a test you can run without them being there to find that color that we've come up with. So this
Mhm.
all came together for me. I thought, why do we do this? And then in my divorce, the judge let my ex take my children from Denver to Chicago. Why? Well, we recorded a lot. Well, in that courtroom, who was the petitioner and who was the respondent? The petitioner filing the issues, filing for the divorce. The respondent responding to all those claims the other parties bringing forward. Well, I was the respondent. I was building and growing forward, but that didn't matter. All they wanted to do was end the problem and get this out of their court system. So they let my kids go, let my ex go. That was a huge detriment to me and to my children. We don't think about that. So that silence that we keep going and we keep hiding for our parents, for our children. And when I say parents, I'm also including grandparents. That whole
Right.
process of lack of unity in our system. And I'm jumping around a lot of subjects. I'd love to talk about these in more detail, but that whole process of our legal system is all created not by the judges and the attorneys, but it's by our legislature that we don't think about. Our House and our Senate, federal level, state level, even on the city council level for our police officers, city police. It's all about the way those laws are written in what's called legal ease, or I call legal tease. We write a lot of laws that they go to court, and a lot of times they go to Supreme Court, which tells us if something's going to the Supreme Court because they can't figure out what's works, that tells us that that law that's written in legal ease, again, legal tease, is not good. It's not working. We need to write the laws in English so that if I'm supposed to obey it, if you're supposed to obey it, if any of our audience is supposed to obey that law, we need to understand it. And we are not lawyers. We do not have a legal degree. That needs to be the laws that we need to follow, just like the instructions of the things that we buy down at the store, how to put something together. It's got
Right.
to be written so we can understand it. Or maybe there's a website we can go to that explains it better. Or our laws, our statutes, that does not exist. So we've got to get together with our legislature, House and Senate at all levels, and help us be able to achieve unity by us all understanding what is right versus wrong. And when it comes down to the domestic violence, what is right and what is wrong is not clear to a lot of people, male or female. mother or female, a mother or father, man or woman. And that's where we have to start. So back in my divorce back in 1990, that put me on this path to get into the part of achieving unity. And sometimes it's about creating unity to help us all grow forward together. There's no invention that was invented by one person. It was all by a team. No matter how great it might be for that one person, or that one person's name has a dedication to whatever special entity they brought forward, they worked with a team, not just one person. That unity that came together to make our life better is what we also need to do with our legislature to help make the laws better. So those people, for like you're saying, that are being a recipient of any form of domestic violence knows ahead of time that law needs to be able to be read by any senior in high school, to be able to read and understood so they know what is right and what is wrong. And domestic violence is wrong, and we need to bring that out to everyone. And we must break that silence about domestic violence. And that's where I come from, and that's where I'd like to take it forward, and working with you and your organization to make that happen.
Yeah, wonderful. As you were talking about your experience and stuff, things came to my mind of, today there is such an atmosphere of everybody really is ruled into an atmosphere of their emotion, especially anger. We see that a lot across social media here lately. And in domestic violence, of course, we know that can turn very deadly. But in other aspects, anger can be focused and used to bring about real effective change when something outrages us, and we see a clarity of thought in the process of these things need to be changed, whether it's legislation or even within ourselves. And how do people get to that place? Because like a lot of people right now, they are extremely angry and they don't know what to do with that. They don't have purpose with it.
That's a very good point. And like you said, they don't have purpose with it. But why do, and I want to say we, I'm not saying, I joke about, again,
Yeah.
working with Microsoft and
Yeah.
Microsoft Windows and Microsoft Office. I use it all the time. And Zoom, I use it all the time, but I don't say I don't get angry at times. And I don't, I'm not going to deny, I'm not going to deny sometimes I just say, what the frustration? I mean, it's so aggravating, but I do know that when I get out of this chair, that I walk into another room and I have a spouse there or family there or anyone there, my frustration with Microsoft or Windows or Office or Zoom has nothing to do with them.
Mhm.
They were not part of it in any way, manner, shape, or form. So my frustrations, and you can contact me at whatthefrustration.com, that frustration is mine. And just because I go into another room and I have a child that's crying, or I have a child that wants money because they want to go somewhere, or I have a spouse that spilt the milk on the counter, that's my frustration. We can clean up the milk. We can talk to our children. It's not a situation where we need to take that anger anywhere else. Because one thing we have to continue to ask ourselves, where's the value in
Yeah.
anger?
So where is the value in anger?
There is no value. There is absolutely no value in anger. It only makes us look foolish.
Yes.
That's just bottom line. What, you think about who are some of these greatest boxers, and who's that boxer now that's almost my age and is in a boxing
Uh,
ring? I just
Tyson.
Okay, right,
Tyson.
Tyson.
Yes.
Now, Tyson and his boxing battle partner, whatever you want to call it, made a lot of money. Made millions of dollars. But here's the thing. When they went into that enclosed ring, which is the only place where they're fighting, was controlled, and there was a referee. Excuse me. And also, they signed contracts before they got into that ring that, I don't know the legal entities and what exactly was said, but it pretty much says hey, this guy could beat you up and you're going to be okay with it. And okay, I'll sign that because they're in that ring. So when you're in that ring and you're both signed on it, that's okay. You can get angry in that ring. You can get as angry as you want to in that ring because you're not hurting anyone else, impacting anyone else that doesn't want to be in that fight. So
Mhm.
we've got to realize that that anger in a measured amount in an enclosed environment. And again, we look at some of the basketball players. I mean, some of the, to be foolish sports figures that get into fights and arguments. Well, if they're on that field during that game, or if they're on that basketball court or whatever court they're in, and that's part of it, that's fine. You're in a signed situation where you have the ability to be angry. That anger is a accepted emotion. But you're in that court, you're in that ring, you're on that field. If you're in a chess match and you're sitting on the both sides of the table, you have that area. Of course, I hope there's no anger there, but you could get angry about another mover losing. But the bottom line, you're in a situation where there's two people that are agreeing to the process. But taking
Mhm.
that chess match, you probably have an agreement written that there will be no violence,
Right.
just like there is for you and I in a family or a relationship, that there will be no violence because we have laws written that way, but nobody understands them. I just kind of jump both ways there, but when they're in that boxing ring, they know it's in that boxing ring. When you're in a marriage, it's around the world. You don't hit each other. When you're walking down the street and somebody does something, they get in your way, you miss the bus, you miss the taxi, they get in the taxi ahead of you. Life happens, but you don't get angry. There's no value in it. Yelling at somebody, not that I don't yell at my laptop like I'm saying again at Microsoft
Right.
Office, but that's different. When you're working with another individual, that yelling does no good. We've got to think about where's the value. Back to that
Mhm.
boxing ring and those people getting paid a lot of money. Tyson and then his fighting partner, boxing partner, getting paid a lot of money. When you're in a situation with your spouse or anywhere on the street and you get angry, have you ever been paid any money for that anger? Not at all. There truly is no value. None. And we've got to be able to learn that our prior learning, our culture has let that go.
Mhm.
And for too many people, it's okay, but it's not. Have to change that thought process that the anger is not okay, impacting someone else is not valid, and we must stop that.
Mhm.
Anger is actions not gaining effective results. There is no effective result to that anger. But instead, we have got to get that point where we're being calm, canceling that anger, and leading motivation. And that will take us to a next positive step instead of being down that negative path with anger.
Right. Because essentially, that with anger is the opposite, because you were talking about the value for a boxer in the boxing ring, but in a relationship, it really, anger is a devaluation of what you have going on. So, so in relationships, the anger leads to the devaluing of the relationship you have between each other, your children, how you relate to one another, and the whole atmosphere of the home. I think by the continued anger from either or parties.
I like that word you called in there, devalue. That's correct because there is no value, but there's also the negative side of it because it takes away value. It devalues the situation. And again,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to get paid for it. Who has ever seen, well, excuse me, let me rephrase that because some people like it when there's a fight on the football field or a basketball court or something that, oh,
Mm-hmm.
he swung, he hit the guy and that turned people on for some reason. That's a thought process. That's an emotion we need to think about more and eliminate from our day to day life. If you want to hit somebody, go sign a contract with them in a boxing ring. Go get on the field with them on a football field. How about a wrestling match? They still have those, but they're in that ring. If that's what you want, make sure both parties are on the same page. Because if you don't, as you mentioned, Tara, you're devaluing the partnership, the relationship, and the life of both parties, right?
Right. Yes, absolutely. So, how do we work through those kinds of dynamics when we do get angry so that we aren't devaluing one another?
Great question. And that's what's so tough because we do have the cultures of yesterday, because that process, and let's just take the concept of marriage and a man and a woman. For centuries, we have lived with a thought that the man is stronger, the man rules. The man may be stronger, but that does not mean they have the right to take advantage of another person, either direction. So again, probably here, what we've learned over the centuries is that the man has ruled in the past and they're the dominating character, the dominant character. But what we are to do, what we're doing today is realizing we are all the same. And that concept, as you're saying, it's hasn't been easy so far, but it's all about awareness and education. And that's what
Mhm.
I want to do. I've seen that that's what you want to do. So the more we help others understand that they realize that they got angry and probably looked foolish. Who has really said, "Oh, he looked great. Let's take pictures of that anger and show that to our children." It doesn't happen. What we've got to do is realize that there is no value to that anger, but there is value in that ability to have the motivation to build from where we are to grow to a better tomorrow for ourselves, our spouses, and our children or grandchildren.
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
It's so easy.
Yeah. Well, it should be, shouldn't it?
Well, it is easy. And that's the biggest problem that we have today is that culture is not succeeding yet. Because that's what I talk about with achieving unity by harnessing the power, and I do mean power, the
Hmm.
power of encouraging, inspiring, and including others. Because by doing that, we can do so much more together. If we are partners in the process, and sometimes it may be just the process of smiling at each other, we're
Hmm.
building a better world. And that will help each of us, no matter where we are around the world, just understand where's the value. Unless you
Yeah.
have value, don't do it. You don't work. We all volunteer some. There's no doubt about
Hmm.
it. We volunteer when we can, but we all have to work also or earn an income also somehow. So when we're doing that, either one, when we're volunteering or our employment, if we can do it together, we can achieve so much more and earn much, much more.
So I want to kind of go back to where you were talking about legislation and how it not being clear, and that's why it moves through the courts. Let's talk about that a little bit more because that I found it interesting.
Thank you, Tara. That because I'm sorry, you got on one of my hot spots because as I mentioned before, the term visitation used to be the term that was always used for the person who wasn't the custodial parent. Person that was a non-custodial parent, they got visitation with their children or their grandchildren. We
Right.
can't forget our grandparents, but it's mostly about the parents and the children that they were visitors. Well, cut that right away. And back in 1992, we created Colorado Revised Statutes. We changed that term from visitation to parenting time
Right.
because that's the time with each parent. Doesn't matter if you're the custodial parent or non-custodial parent, you have parenting time. Now, when we did that, our judicial system, our lawyers and our judges didn't, there were a lot of them. And again, that's where I go into the 80-20 rule. So I jump a lot, but there's just so much to this.
Mm-hmm.
If we know the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule first came out that 20% of the people owned 80% of the world, 20% of the people make 80% of the income. There is a smaller percentage that are doing more, not always negative and not always positive. But in my speaking and my coaching, I also talk about, and we talk about 80-20. It's not exactly that. It could be 60-40. It could be 90-10. But the bottom line, there's a percentage that's one way and a percentage that's the other. In our world, too many times, it's the extreme that's on that lower percentage. And that's also what we get into with anger or violence. There's actually a very small number of people who are violent. If you take the, what's it, 8 billion people that we have in this world, it's a small number, but it's an impactful number. If you look at something as simple as the election that we just had, Vice President Kamala, I'm proud of her, glad she ran. Former President Trump, our new president-elect, I'm going to follow him. He was elected, whether we like it or not. I
Mm-hmm.
am going to follow and work with him. He is going to be our leader. How can we build and work together and not be negative? We've got to work in achieving unity going forward. But it's the situation of where are we getting our laws from? When we
Mm-hmm.
get instructions from, we go buy something at the store, if it's buy a can of beans and how you cook them, warm them up, how you warm your beans, if you buy a pizza, how long you cook it, it's on the directions are on there. It's understandable. But the law that we're supposed to obey, it's not clear. And
Mm-hmm.
they need to be written so we can all understand them. We talk about our school system, and just for example, the number of English teachers that are out of a job. Why aren't we hiring those English teachers through our legislature when we write those laws that we are all supposed to obey to make them clear to all of us? Why don't we write those at the high school level? Why don't we write a law? And I'm working toward it. I'm talking to our legislature about this. I'm not looking for someone else to do this. We all need to take part. We all need to work together, but work with our legislature, House, Senate, federal, state, and say, why aren't we writing laws where we can understand them? And I know we're going to hear, oh, we can't write them. That doesn't work. Yes, it does.
Mm-hmm.
English can do anything. We can write it, but we want to write it in English that it can be translated. And I don't know if you've used Google Translate or some other translation programs. We can translate from one language to another language fairly accurately. There's going to be some problems, but they're small. Here in the United States, since English is our most used language, let's vote for and work with our House and our Senate and our president about writing laws that we can all understand or quit punishing people for not understanding them. That's pretty simple. But if you go to court, and I've got them before, and I've got my speeding ticket dismissed before, where's the law? It was speed limit was 55. I was doing 67. Okay, I was breaking the law. Why don't we just, and we're doing better at some of these things now. Here's your
Mm-hmm.
$50 or higher fine anymore. Um, Pay it. But if you don't do that, you can take it. You can go to court and go talk to somebody that works with the judge and say, okay, and this did happen to me. Um, we'll just get you for an improper vehicle. There's no points for that, but you pay $60. Okay, cool. If you got the time to do that, you can get around the law. That's not good.
No, but well, then that's what a lot of domestic violence victims and survivors deal with, because that's something that we I hear constantly within our community is the laws are unclear, especially like as to pertaining protective orders, or just how to what the courts demand in parenting with someone that you yet have a restraining order against, or what all of that looks like, because they are so unprecise that it makes victims very wary. Like even the fact of like when you're in those types of situations, what the law says about if you defend yourself back in these situations and stuff. The laws are so unclear that it makes victims from one moment to another very insecure, because you don't know how the law is going to treat you under your given situation, because the law is unclear.
And that brings up another point, and that's was where I was going. You took that next step. Thank you so much, because it gets into a situation that, like I was talking about the speeding ticket, you get for mine it was an improper vehicle. We get into domestic violence, and there's help for the people who get the domestic violence. There's help for people who have alcohol problems, or people who have drug problems. But you're in a domestic violence. What about the impacted party, and especially with children? Where
Mm-hmm.
is the help for them? We have a situation, again, a legal system, a law system written again by our legislature, our House and Senate, that are writing these laws that we don't understand. So what happens? You are required, if you want good results, to hire a lawyer to help you understand the law. When you go in front of that judge, and we hear all the lawyer jokes about ambulance chasers and the bad things about lawyers, but there are some good ones out there. But what is a judge? Isn't a judge just another lawyer with 5 or more years of adversarial experience? And you say, well, adversarial, what do you mean by adversarial? Well, right, wrong, good, bad, likes you, doesn't like you, likes what you're wearing, likes what you're saying, doesn't like what you're saying, likes your attitude, doesn't like your attitude. That is adversarial. So when you're going into a courtroom in front of a judge, that is generally formally another lawyer, with two of the lawyers, the petitioner and the respondent. Where are you as far as your understanding of what's going on? And they say, well, is this valid? Is this not valid? Can we bring this into the court? Can we not bring this into the court? Is this something that's valid under this law? How many of us understand that when even the lawyers themselves don't understand it? Get into domestic violence. Who's receiving help and who's not receiving help? Who's receiving punishment for the action and who's receiving help from what they went through? And by our current law, we don't know. And it's different each time. So as we break that silence about domestic violence, we also need to break the silence of how our laws are written, so the people that are creating, that are causing domestic violence, know ahead of time what's going to happen and know not to do it. This needs to be taught early. And then, and most of all, our legislature must write laws that we can all understand. Let me give you a personal example.
Okay.
When during my divorce, she got the theoretical custody. She got what's called sole custody at the time also. But I did receive, again, it's called visitation at the time, but I got great parenting time because I threw a fit, and I had to. Being that dad in a divorce, I had every other weekend, but I had them overnight. I picked them up from school on Fridays. I took them back to school on Monday. And I had them at my house, of course, during the weekends. And then I had them Wednesday night overnight. I picked them up from school on Wednesday, took them back to school on Thursday mornings. I had to, my ex and I didn't have to have any discussion other than we hopefully would have it on the benefit of our children, but there was no passing back and forth at the parking lot at the grocery store. It was good. But one day, my theoretical weekend, it was in the court orders. It was all good. I had the children. One Sunday morning, she had called about something and she was mad about something. I'm not even sure it was about me, but she came over to the house, grabbed the children, slapped me, called the police. Again, this is my house. She come over, she slapped me, and my face was red where she had slapped me, and the police officer saw it. We both had to go to jail for the night. We both had to take anger classes. Now, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying anger classes wouldn't help everybody, but I had to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
It was my house. My weekend with the children, she came over to my house. Where is there justice for all in a legal system that allows that? I couldn't afford attorneys. I'm already paying over $1,000 a month for child support. I also had to pay for alimony, and I've got to afford an attorney also. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, the system doesn't make it where you can represent yourself and you can't determine clearly what the laws are so that you can abide by them. So there's not equal justice in the system.
There's not justice for all. You're exactly right. So in this domestic violence situation, there's a lot of parents, and I will say it's mostly mothers, that are being hurt by this and have no help. They have no support. Many of them can't do anything better than just go back with that person that's causing the domestic violence.
Right.
And that is where we need to break that silence, as you're saying, so we can stop the violence everywhere. And that starts in our schools because
Mm-hmm.
we learn from the schools what goes forward. And whether we like it or not, I learned a lot from my children when they went to school. Of course, I helped them with their homework, but I saw some of the things that they were learning and seeing. We need to make sure that we're all doing that so that we're learning that from the schools to the parents as well. And we need to be able to learn in high school and college. And I'd love to speak to more universities about violence and not being involved in violence because there is no value. There is no
Mm-hmm.
value. Actions not gaining effective results. There's no value to the anger. And until we teach that to everyone and we have that understanding, again, there's always going to be that Pareto principle where there's going to be that 1% to 3% that we're going to have troubles with. But we need to teach them and train them before they're out in the world, during the high school, during the college, during the junior high, teach them that it's not right. But we need to work together in achieving unity by harnessing that power of encouraging, inspiring, and including others, personally and professionally. So we all know about this. Break that silence, as you're saying. Let's train. Let's educate. And let me help. Tara, how can I help you?
Yeah, because without having even within our community, without having a unified message to put out there to promote awareness and education and advocacy, it becomes very disoriented. And I think that's also part of the frustration that survivors have out there is it seems to be very dysfunctional from the legal system, even down to the advocacy. And so when we can all kind of unite and shore up those gaps that are happening within the system, I think it just promotes a whole lot better atmosphere for victims as well.
I'm with you. And how many times do our teachers don't know what to do? And our teachers themselves have fear because
Right.
they don't want to break the law. They don't want to get in trouble, but they don't understand the law either any more than you or I do. Some may
Mm-hmm.
understand it better than we do, but there's still so much to it that they don't know. And let's go back to even our police officers. There have been
Mm-hmm.
some police officers that have done some things that were just unimaginable. But that goes back to that subset, as I call it, of the Pareto principle. How many police officers do bad things? It's again that 1 to 3%. But how does that 97+%, how can they understand the law? The first thing would say, oh, well, they teach them that. Oh, really? They teach them how to have a law degree, to be understanding of language written in that legal E's and legal T's. Again, a lot of wonderful police officers are out there, and I know some, but can they understand that law? If these laws are going up to one Supreme Court after another till it gets to the federal Supreme Court, that tells us right there the law is not good, but yet we're expecting our police officers and our teachers to understand it also. How is this going
Mhm.
to work?
Interpretation is a part of the problem there because one officer may interpret it one way, another officer interprets it another. So again, where's the clarity of thought, right?
Right. And that's again that situation of a police officer is called into a domestic violence situation. What is the law and how is it written? They only know certain things. And I know in Denver, it was one person has to go to jail. That's my understanding. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't give legal advice. Especially in my case, she came over to my house, she slapped me. But even if she wouldn't have slapped me, if there was any perpetrator in that situation, it wasn't me. But I too had to go to jail for a night, and I too had to take a anger class. That's not right. But you talk about a police officer situation. What did they know to do? I can't blame the police officers. They were following, like you said, the interpretation of the law as they knew it or as they were told by the police department. They were exercising what they knew to be right. And without going to a lawyer, paying for legal representation, my hands were tied. How many domestic violence situations are the same way?
Right.
And there's more than 1 to 3% of domestic violence. That's much higher. So we need to be doing something. Our legislature needs to be writing laws that we can all understand. Every parent, every individual must know what domestic violence is because domestic violence is not just for marriage.
Right.
And that's what we need to learn. All of us needs to be part of our culture. Each and every one of us know that there is no value to violence.
Yes, exactly. And so many people think that with domestic violence, I think you and I discussed that a little bit when I was on your podcast, is that so many people don't understand. They think it's such a private matter, but yet in domestic violence fatalities, 2/3 of the victims are bystanders. So it spills out into our communities and reaches you. It's not just a personal problem. So when you think, oh, well, that's just the neighbor arguing over there, that's just them doing their thing, people have to consider that a lot of times this spills out and over and it affects you outside of their house as well in the community and it can be deadly. And so there has to be a unified front as a community as well, and not not just from our legal system.
I, and again, just like on my podcast earlier with us talking about that, again, that's a situation where people are afraid to report situations when there is something like domestic violence across the street or next door because of our legal system and the way the laws are written. How are they going to be impacted by that?
Mm-hmm.
And we have that feeding of silence and not stopping domestic violence because we don't know what kind of emotional trauma we're going to go through just by trying to be helpful.
Right.
We're doing something, but that impact back on us, like you said, how many other people are impacted by domestic violence, just like you were just saying? But we don't want to call the police, even though we know it's what we need to do. We don't realize it's what we must do. Because again, I feel for the police officers. And a lot of people have some bad feelings were police officers and say, oh, get rid of police officers. We don't need them. Yes, we do. There are a lot of great ones out there.
Hmm.
There are a lot of the bad ones. But that again goes back to that extreme I was talking about earlier. I always refer to as the Pareto principle, 80-20 rule, but it's also the 397 rule, 3% and 97%. 3% of the police officers, and maybe it's 1% of the police officers, are giving a bad name for all police officers. Same thing happened for me in court with a deadbeat dad. That one guy, and there may have been a few more than just one, caused an aura of dads are bad. And that's just not true. Let's look at the people that we just elected. And I do say we, because even though we
Hmm.
didn't elect them, we didn't do anything for them not to be elected. So, and again, we have a lot of negativity toward Trump. He's our president. I'm going to support him. But the bottom line here is in our legislature, our 100 senators, there's three of them that are going to be causing problems. Maybe it's one, maybe it's three, because they're on that extreme. And it's not just the Democrats, it's not just the Republicans. There's 1 to 3% of each of them, independents, libertarians, and the
Hmm.
unaffiliated. It's those extremes that are a problem. I think I mentioned to you then, my license plate was RIDL, Riddle, Republican, Independent, Democratic, Libertarian, Riddle. Why is it such a riddle to build a better world for our children? Why is it such a Republican? Why is it such an independent? Why is it such a Democrat? Why is it such a libertarian? Riddle, RIDL. Why is it such a riddle to build a better world for our children? How many of any of those parties think domestic violence is valuable? Why can't they write that down in English, Tara? I'm giving
Yes.
you a hard time here. I'm playing with you because you're on
Well,
the phone.
no, but you're so correct because any one of those people, or who are they going to say they don't love their children, who don't want family, who don't want a better world? So why not unify in that?
Why can't we have single subject bills in our federal government like we do in Colorado? Every bill must relate, every subtitle, every part of the statute must relate directly to the title of the bill. We can't have a bill that says stop domestic violence and then say Johnny or Janie's uncle gets a contract with their construction company for a couple of mil. And I know that's a bit of dramatic, but if you read our bills and how they're passed through our legislature, there's a lot of far-fetched ideas in a bill with something that must be as simple as stopping domestic violence. There are subtitles in that bill that relate to nothing about that title of the bill.
Right.
So if our legislature, if we would all work together, and some of us are, like yourself, myself, to stop that process and write better bills, we can make it so everyone understands it, and then we could even teach law, and we could put their lawyers on there. They have their monopoly, make them be the ones that teach it, but we could teach law that we could all understand, right?
No, I agree. Absolutely.
And that's what we need to start. I mean, we could get into term limits in our federal government. We could talk about that. We could talk about all kinds of things. But if we just started with that one, and that is just to write laws that everyone that has to obey that law can understand quickly. If we could just start there.
Yeah, that would be nice. It's a lot simpler than they make it to be.
And it's up to us, you, me, and the people that are listening to this program today. We must talk to our legislators. We must let them know that it can be done. Don't be negative. Everybody
Hmm.
always, I say everybody, that's a dramatic, but too many of us, anytime we hear something or see something, we have expectations already built within us, our culture. Oh,
Hmm.
well, we can't write those laws in English because they're too technical. No, we ship, we fly rockets to far off satellites and to other stars, and we have space stations. The instructions are written in English. We can do that. We can write our laws in plain English. and we can write them so they can also be translated into other languages. So when we have visitors from other countries that I love when they come, I love going there, but they need to understand it also. But let's start when we talk about get the silence out of domestic violence. We must do that by speaking up about how our laws are written so that we all can understand them, right?
Right. Absolutely. Well, Mark, do you have any final thoughts on this topic before we close off this episode?
Tara, as always, I love my logo. Again, achieving unity through the power of encouraging, inspiring, and including others personally and professionally, because that will help us all create the world that we want to see and the world we want to leave for our children and our grandchildren. Let's work together. Let's achieve unity and make it understandable by all.
Absolutely, I agree. Thank you so much, Mark. And where can somebody find you if they want to look up more information or get in contact with you?
The best thing is, of course, just my achievingunity.com. You can see my finger pointing upwards, but
Mm-hmm.
achievingunity.com, markentrikin.com, or if you see by my name, my phone number, 303-362-8733. And that's easy to remember because it's 303 focused, reality focused. We must be focused on creating the ability to read and understand our laws. Let's be focused on that. 303 focused. Let's talk. Let's talk soon. Thank you.
Awesome. Wonderful. And we'll have all that information linked down into the description of this episode. So, again, I want to thank you, Mark, for being here and thank our supporters. This concludes this episode. Please be sure to check us out at our website, www.breakthesilencedv.org. If you feel inspired to help support our mission, leave us a donation. Check out our different services and programs. We would love to have you be a part, and we will see you next time.